Hello everybody, welcome back to Off Meta Musings. I'm your host Itan, and today I've got something pretty interesting for you. If you're a subscriber of Warhammer Plus, you'll know that they quite frequently do Warcry battle reports, and today one's gone up featuring the new Bloodhunt box. We've got the Askagan True Blades versus the Claws of Karanak 1000 points match play. And not only do they play through, but they also show a bunch of the new fighter cards and they show a bunch of the new abilities. So today I thought that I would go through those, and so we effectively get a sneak peek at what we're going to expect in the coming box. So without further ado, let's get going. First, I'd like to begin with the Askagan True Blades. Now, you can see all the profiles here. You can see that they all have movement 5, which is pretty good, I think. It makes them one of the faster warbands out there. Mostly toughness 4, but even their chaff model here, the Acolyte, at 90 points is actually very expensive compared to other warbands. I know that you're supposed to get 8 of these guys in the box, so if that's kind of the target number that you're supposed to be building to, then yeah, it is a little bit more elite. It's a little bit more hard-hitting than your other warbands, but even then, your Acolytes have 12 wounds apiece, which is pretty good for chaff units, but again, on a bit of the low side for 90-point units. Your Ascetics, they're both going to be swinging with 2 attacks apiece, so despite the very high damage value on that, you kind of have to watch out to see how that's going to go. Again, they only have 15 wounds, so we're looking a little bit glass cannon-y, maybe a bit like the Jade Obelisk. The Cursed Blood is a little bit faster, it's movement 6, but, 4 attacks to strength 5, 2, 4. It's a decent damage profile, but I would say he's on the slightly expensive side. He does have 25 wounds, which makes him a little bit more tanky, but we're sitting at 190 points here. Isn't exactly the cheapest fighter. I do think the star of the show is the Exemplar. I think 205 points is not an awesomely high amount that you would be paying. He does have 20 wounds, which isn't terrible, but yeah, really that damage profile is what's doing it for him. Let's go through these. What have we got? We've got the 2 Ascetics, we've got a couple of different weapon profiles. We've got Charnel Mace, which is strength 6 at 3-4 damage, and we've got the Howling Glaive, which is strength 5 at 2-5 damage. Now, I think out of the both of these, the one you want to be using is the Charnel. It's going to be wounding on 3s more often, and I think generally you're going to get more use out of that 3 base damage than you would be out of a lower base damage and a higher crit damage. The Acolytes, I've got a couple of different weapon profiles here. We've got the Throat Taker and we've got the Falchion. Throat Taker is pretty nice. It's got range 3, which isn't bad. Strength 4, which I value highly. And we got 4 crit damage instead of the usual 3-3-1-3. So that's not terrible for the 90 points you're paying. Alternative, we've got the Falchion, which again, it trades up for an attack. There seems to be a lot of this 2 attack high damaging stuff in the warband. Strength 5, which I quite like, because obviously I like winning on 3s, with the 2-5 damage profile. The Falchion is essentially the same stats as the Ascetic with Howling Glaive. It's got 1 less range on it, but it's on a cheaper body. So I would imagine that you want to be taking Falchions, so Acolytes with Falchions, over Ascetics with Glaives. The Pariah is, again, 2 attack strength 5-2-5, so exactly like the Falchion, and again exactly like the Ascetic. It's got more wounds than the Ascetic, but a lower toughness. It's only sitting at toughness 3. So the question is, what do you value? If you don't have the 10 points, then your Pariah is basically going to do the same damage as the Ascetic is going to do, but with more wounds, just at a lower toughness, which is fine. But if you really don't have the points, you can just take another 90-point Acolyte with your Falchion and do the same amount of damage. They do have different rune marks, so maybe something will come into play for the abilities that they're going to use. But yeah, on the face of it, that's kind of what it looks like. Now, moving into abilities, they've also showed us the reaction, and they've showed us a double, a triple, and a quad. Their reaction is Lofty Disdain, so they can make the reaction when they're targeted by a melee attack action, but before hit rolls are made. +1 toughness. I think this will very much depend on what is hitting you. If a lot of strength 3 is hitting you and you've got Ascetics on the board, it won't matter. If a lot of strength 4 is hitting you and you really want them to wound on 5s, then maybe Lofty Disdain will come into play. We've seen in Warcry that if you're going to have a damage reduction ability, you really want an ability that's going to flat out reduce the amount of damage you're taking, and flat +1 to your stats doesn't really see much use. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see how good Lofty Disdain ends up being. Personally, I don't see it getting all that much use, especially when your damaging fighters anyway, are only sitting at 2 attacks. So you really need as many attacks as possible in order to do the damage to kill your opponents. They've got a double here, Moment of Savagery. A fighter can only use this ability if an enemy fighter has been taken down by an attack action made by them this activation. This fighter makes a bonus move or bonus attack. Okay, so this is... a lot of fighters have this ability. The use of this will really depend on how much damage your fighter can put out in one attack action, and if they can reliably kill whatever it is they're running into. We're going to see in a minute, I'm going to show you a little peek into the back end here, which fighters will be able to and won't be able to do that. But it's a good double because it's a free action, but its usefulness will really depend on the stats of your fighters and what it is you're fighting against. For a triple, they have Perfect Strike. Now, this is only useful on the Ascetics. Now, until the end of this fighter's activation, attack actions made by this fighter score a critical hit on a 5. Question is, will this be on a triple be more powerful than Onslaught on a double? Because generally, when we're looking at abilities like this, the +1 attack always wins out. I'm going to show you in a minute just exactly what I'm talking about for that. And for a quad, we've got Worthy Foes. Until the end of this fighter's activation, add 2 to this fighter's move characteristic and the attack's characteristic of melee attack actions made by this fighter. This is interesting. Is it better than Rampage? For a quad, your 2 attack guys would go up to 4 attack guys for 2 attacks, whereas Rampage will give you an extra attack action, so that'll be a net +2 attacks. So if you're already in combat with someone and you need to put the damage on, then yes, this is very good. If you need to kill chaff fighters, then you're generally going to be using Rampage, because you need the extra movement and the extra attack action flat out than just the extra attacks. I've got a little sneak peek into the back end here. This is actually the spreadsheet that I use to do all of my calculations, and we can see I've plugged in all the stats of the fighters with their weapons that they have so far. We've got the Exemplar, we've got the guys with the falchions, we've got the guys with all this stuff. We've got how much damage they're going to do on a 3, 4, and a 5 if they're wounding. We've got their weighted damage. So if you've seen any of my reviews before, you'll know that my weighted damage is based on the assumption that 25% of fighters are going to be toughness 3, 50% are going to be toughness 4, and 25% are going to be toughness 5 or more. And we've got the score. The lower the better. We're aiming for around about 25, in that ballpark, 25 or less. And what we can see is I've got the damages here. We've got the Exemplar, okay? And the Exemplar is our hero model. He's doing a weighted damage of 9.25, which is actually very, very good. It means you're one-shotting those 8 wound chaff models, and I find that a very valuable thing to be able to do. The rest of the damage is actually a bit low across the board, I would say. It's mainly down to these 2 attack values. There was a question for the Ascetics if their triple is going to be better than a double. So on their base attack, they're doing on average 4.46. Now, if we onslaught with the channel mace, we are looking at 6.69 damage per attack. And I've done the maths before, and using the crit on 5's ability on your basic 2 attacks effectively gives you a weighted average damage of 5. So in effect, that triple is a little bit of a trap. You don't really want to be using that triple at all. Now, the reason for that is because your base damage is so high, it's almost always better just going for more attacks than it is for trying to boost that crit damage. Now, I do think that if I were to build a warband with just what we've seen, I think that a build of several Exemplars plus Acolytes would be decent. So the Exemplars are the heroes and the Acolytes are the lowest level, the 90-point guys. That would be good to start with. The Curse Blood isn't exactly bad, however, so I think that if you're going to be taking other heroes as allies, a couple of Curse Bloods wouldn't be awful. Outside of that warband, if you were taking another death faction, maybe the Exemplar might be a decent choice for an ally, because it does have the really high damage at the not so high cost with the decent movement. So I think that might be something interesting to look at. Now, going on to the Claws of Karanak. Again, some common themes. What have we got? A lot of toughness 3 in this one. Even your medium guys, they're sitting at toughness 3 with only 15 wounds, so they're going to be very squishy. But you can see they've got decent damage, right? 3, 4, 2, 5, 4, 4, 2, 4 with the brutalizers. So I think they it could be decent. Blood Whelps, 90 points again, so they're on the expensive side. They got 12 wounds, which isn't bad for a chaff unit, but again, toughness 3, so those 12 wounds are going to disappear fairly quickly. Barbed Spear only has 2 attacks, but a range 2. The Claw Flail, I think, is the one that you're going to go for because it's got that range 3, it's got more attacks, and it's got the strength 4, which is quite nice. So that kind of allows it to keep out of trouble and be able to do its damage from afar whilst not being engaged itself. So I think Claw Flail is what you're going to go for. We've got Shredder Blade and Meat Hook. Again, these kind of remind me of Rotmire Creed. This really reminds me of Rotmire Creed with the bloated ones. So the bloated ones, if we remember, we've got the guy with the pair of claws and then the one with claw and net, whereas the one with the net had an extra ability. Now, we've seen, we'll see how the abilities work out in this case, but we've seen, at least with Rotmire Creed, that you want to be taking a mix of bloated ones because that net ability is so strong. And considering it's got something called a meat hook, it's quite possible that it'll have a net ability as well in combat, hopefully one that does damage. If it does, I think that these cheaper brutalizers are going to compare quite well with the brutalizers with Shredder Blades. And lastly, we got Dogman or Mandog here, the Hound of Wrath, 190 points, so exactly like the Curse Blood from the vampires. I think it's a little bit better. 5 attack, strength 424, that's not bad. Movement 7, so it's a little bit faster, still got toughness 4. Only has 18 wounds. You'll see that across this warband, they are pretty low on the wound side of things, whilst also being fairly expensive. So effectively we've got a warband of glass cannons, a little bit like the Jade Obelisk. Jade Obelisk take that to the extreme where all their guys have 10 or 12 wounds, and these guys are a little bit more tanky than that with only a little bit less damage output. When we going on to their abilities, we've got a reaction here, Bay for Coward's Blood. Now a fighter can make this reaction after a visible enemy fighter within 1 inch of them makes a disengage action. Until the end of the battle round, add 1 to the attack's characteristic of melee attack actions made by friendly fighters that target that enemy fighter. So if people run away, everyone else attacking that fighter gets +1 attack. Again, I don't think this will be used all that much because it might just be better to use your actions just to attack and to actually try and kill the guy instead of trying to attack the guy who's running away. On the double, they've got Pack Hunters. So you pick a visible friendly fighter within 6 inches that has both the Claws of Karanak rune mark and the Agile rune mark that is not activated yet this battle round. You can activate this fighter immediately after this fighter's activation ends. Okay, now the Claws of Karanak rune mark and the Agile rune mark, who's got those? The Hounds of Wrath and Bloodwell. I think that Pack Hunters is fairly strong as an ability. As with any game that relies on I go, you go, set amount of abilities, that can really break that cycle and be able to force activations on your fighters before your opponent gets to act could be really, really strong, I think. So I think Pack Hunters could be good. And then they've got a double Blood for the Blood God. A fighter can only use this ability if an enemy fighter has been taken down by attack action made by them this activation. Bonus move or bonus attack. So the same as the vampire action. I am more hopeful for the Claws of Karanak to be able to make more use out of this, simply because we can see it, their base damage is higher. Again, a little peek into the back end here. I've got all the fighters, so they're ordered by damage per point, so the score. At the top, sitting the Brutalizer with Shredder Blades. You can see the damage that they're doing. Average weighted damage 6.0 with the Shredder Blades, which is actually pretty good. The Pack Lord doing 9.38 damage. It's huge. It can one-shot those 8-wound chaff models. You put some dice into it, it's one-shotting a 10-wound chaff model as well. Very good. 5 damage from the Brutalizer with Shredder Blade and Meat Hook. Now, the difference between the Blade and Meat Hook is 1 point of damage, effectively. So we really need to see what ability that Meat Hook has in order to make a proper assumption on this. If it's exactly like the Barb Net from Rotmire Creed, then it'll be really, really good. And I would expect to take Meat Hooks over double Shredder Blades any day of the week. The Hound of Wrath is very good, 7.5 damage. Now, it is 7.5, so it's got kind of the same problem that Varangard do, in that it's not guaranteed to one-shot an 8-wound chaff model. You might have to put some dice into it, but then again, it is much cheaper than Varangard, so I would expect to take a couple. And lastly, you've got the Blood Whelps with Spear and the Claw Flail. I did say that the Spear was probably less appealing than the Claw Flail. It does slightly more damage, but I think overall that extra 3-inch range is really, really useful in your games of Warcry. Right, and that is it. That's all that they showed, which is effectively most of the warbands, actually. actually. There's only a few abilities that we haven't seen, and maybe a couple of weapon profiles that we might not have seen. And to be honest, I quite like what I'm seeing. I think you're going to have two warbands that kind of try and achieve the same thing, but in different ways. One of them is very glass cannony, the other one is slightly more survivable. But yeah, I think that in the box they'll be pretty evenly matched. And yeah, that's it really. That's it from me for today. So if you like what you see, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments section below what you think about the warbands. If you're excited for them, if you're not excited, I certainly am myself. And yeah, so when the warbands come out properly, I will do a deep dive on them as I usually do, and we can all look forward to that. But yeah, that's it from me, and I will see you next time.